for everyone on here who is unfamiliar with Matt, like Matt Matt started getting notoriety from being on Shark Tank. That's where he kind of got the second wave of people knowing who he was. But before that, he obviously was a successful entrepreneur and somebody who is partnered with the owner of the Miami Dolphins, Stephen Ross, and they partner with a company called RSE Ventures. And lots of accolades along the way. And one of the most recent things that Matt has done is he's become an author, and not just an author, but a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. And that's actually how Matt and I got connected. And so, Matt, thank you first off for writing this book. Right, so you have it right there, I have it right back there, and right back here. And
Thank you.
we're actually going to give away 30 of these books today to people on here, as a way to
Awesome. Thank
show,
you.
yeah, there's a way to show respect for you, and also to give people value. Like, that's always the number one thing, is like, how do we give people value? And this book is very valuable. So, but anyway, so just want to say thank you for being on here. And then secondly, I want to introduce you to my co-host Sam Singh, who I just really grateful for him. And he's somebody who helps me when I start talking too much. He comes in and like says the more articulate, funny things that gives me off the hook for just blabbering. So that's why I bring him on here. And very much somebody who like gives value through his presence and his question asking. And anyway, Sam, please take the stage, because I am now talking too much.
I love it. It's funny when you go on your rambles. It's the best thing ever. Matt, for someone that's doing all that you're doing right now, right? Time and attention are two, in my opinion, the two most important resources that you could have. And for you to be able to spend those with us today, it means the absolute world. Before we go any further, I have to say this. I absolutely have to say this, and it's about burn the boats. When I did something very, very scary, which was leaving my W-2 and becoming like going full send to being an entrepreneur, I had to remind myself to do what you basically preach, and that is to burn the boats, and what that means. And so much so to the point where where's the reminder of burning the boats when you're doing something scary? It's your bank account, right? You're leaving the financial safety net of the W-2. So much so, I actually went to Wells Fargo and I changed my online password. So every time I looked at my bank account and how horrible it was, my password was actually burn the boats. So,
That's amazing. Love that.
Thank you. And it's so kind of crazy cool, because today is actually, Logan, you didn't know this, today is actually my 2-year anniversary in entrepreneurship. Nice. And it's basically a 2-year anniversary of me learning to burn the boats. To be able to sit here with you, I don't know if it's manifestation, I don't know if it's God, if it's destiny, whatever it is. Well, I mean, I know what it is. Partially it's Logan. But I want to express some tremendous gratitude for you being here today.
Oh, thank you. By the way, it's so funny. Well, we can begin at the end and go back to the beginning and just jump in, but it's great to be with people just working hard to manifest their own autonomy. And for those who haven't read the book, I can go a little bit into my origin story, but I just want to start by this. Let me show you who my accountability partner is, because I always said that I wrote my book to be my accountability partner, just because you believe that you have the answers to certain things about life, because you live long enough, you've been through shit. Like, it doesn't mean because you have the answers, you know how to implement them. And I always say my book is my accountability partner. And my goal is to commiserate, not lecture, right? And I think we don't do enough where we talk about the issues that we struggle with, even when you are quote unquote unsuccessful, or you have more in that bank account. Maybe you could change your password ultimately from burn the boats to like, shit, I burned the boats, I crushed it, like whatever. Like, even still, it's still really hard. So in my book, I try to tell a story. So I need my own accountability partner. So I just got a tattoo. Let me show it to you.
Oh, nice.
So that says burn the boats in Chinese, because the phrase, I love this tattoo, by the way. I love it. It's my first tattoo. I was like, what's the most important thing I could get on my body that I'm going to remind myself every day? And the reason why I chose that is because we attribute the phrase to Cortez in 1519. And he just had a better marketing campaign, because in reality, before Cortez, there was a gentleman named Tariq Ziyad. For anyone out there who's Muslim will understand those words. In 711, he conquered Spain. That's why you have Moorish in Spain. But before him, there was a battle in China in 206 BC, an epic battle. And the words, Pofu, Chenzhou, anybody from China will know those words. And it means burn the boats, actually sink the boats. So it's a long way of saying your point of changing your password. I think we all need to change our password. We all need to be reminded all the time that the single most important thing that you need to work on is staying true to your commitment. And every single day I fight a battle with that constantly, even though I wrote that book. And so I just want to start there saying one of the things that frustrates me about society, Instagram, we're all being preached how to do it. Everyone's just, a guru now. But there isn't enough honesty, like that's not reality. Humans are 2 steps back, forward, 1 step back, if we're lucky. Some days it's 3 steps back, right? So I progress and I regress, and such is the human condition. Part of why I wrote the book is to appropriate this very militaristic phrase, jingoistic, that tends to sometimes be used by, people who are like burn the boats and F everyone else. I wanted to write a book that was actually for the rest of us, maybe, who are not Kevin O'Leary and perfectly self-possessed and don't care what anyone thinks, who have anxiety, who have imposter syndrome. I talk openly about those things in my book because I want to make it clear that most success happens in spite of, not because of. I am here in spite of growing up on government cheese and carrying shame, having anxiety, having weight problems, having cancer, having 1 testicle, getting divorced. I'm here in spite of it. And I bet you a lot of people on this call are here in spite of, but people who don't have a role model think it's because of. And when you think you don't have what they have, it subconsciously sends a message to you that you're not good enough. And so I'm with this book, and I'll stop there. I'm trying to share some of the more ugly parts to realize that you are good enough. And I'm appropriating this phrase that goes back to the beginning of recorded history for the rest of us, for who have to work on burning the boats every single day, including changing your password on your bank account.
Dude, that's so good. It's so good. And I think it's important that, so I introduced you, Matt, to the audience. I introduced Sam to you. And I think it's also important to introduce the audience to you as well. So you also have an idea of who you're talking to as well. And I think it's actually really cool that, you share in your book the story of your mom paying rent, having to, how she paid rent was by cleaning homes, right? And a big portion of the people on here are in the cleaning industry. Like they're people who started as cleaning homes, and they decided maybe I should turn this into a business. And now many of them have aspirations to turn it into $1 million business. Now they have belief because they've seen it's possible, and they're like, I can do this too. And when they do that, they're able to serve more people. We also have a big audience of real estate investors, people who are buying and holding real estate, people who are flipping real estate, people who are wholesaling real estate. And, with the uncertainty of markets and interest rates, like I think like outside of like this call, like there's gonna be so much value in this call, like people need to follow you because you're somebody who talks about your experiences, what you've seen, some things that you believe are going to happen. And I think it is not common for people who have as much credibility as you do to be openly talking about those things and actually like interacting with people about like questions and answers, and whether it's on Threads, which you're actively on, or on Instagram, like you actually engage with the people. And that's one of the reasons that me and Sam are so attracted to you on that. And then the fact that you just like show that how committed you are to your message, that you got a tattoo, your first tattoo. How old are you, Matt? How old are you?
40.
How old?
48.
40. At 48, you got a tattoo of the title of your book on your arm. Like, if that doesn't show commitment, tell me what does.
Oh, by the way, and the reason what I was committed to showing you was how hard it is to remain committed, even the guy who wrote the book, because I want anybody out there who wakes up one day and be like, I suck, man. I can't commit to this idea that I really care about. And that becomes a feedback loop in your mind. You start to doubt and you undermine yourself. I wanted to show to you, even me, I needed that thing tattooed on my arm to remind myself. And so that is really the point. Not that I am the embodiment of the idea, that I'm the embodiment of the idea about how hard it is to work on it and how must we remain committed, just like you changed your password. So, but I would love to, break down the audience a little bit more for me. So it's independent owners, a lot of people in cleaning, real estate, any other areas?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be people in other areas, but that's the focus of this group. Of my community is cleaning business owners, and then Sam brings in the real estate investors, and we're able to kind of combine those two things to create a synergist of a small business owner, right?
So for those who don't know, should I give a little bit of context really quick? I'll do it tight, just a few minutes of context of me, the story, and I don't know how much you gave the audience, but I can do the shorter version. Okay.
Please.
So let me just share the parts that resonate most with me and the salient points for the audience. But I I grew up in Queens, New York. Anyone out there from New York? I grew up in a place called Bayside. I was a product of a single mom, which shaped a lot of my identity. And we was 4 boys, rotten, miserable boys. And my mother was really brilliant, incredible brain, but the product of a lot of horrendous abuse, which didn't become clear to me until much later in life, but framed everything to the point that she didn't even have a high school diploma. So you had this woman with a fierce mind, with a deadbeat dad, and when I was 9 years old, she tried to reclaim her life and get an education. She got her GED at Queensborough Community College and enrolled. And I remember my father being so angry, threw the typewriter at her head. And I woke up the next morning, and she was actually had a Sharpie, and she was putting his initials on underwear. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, Dad'll be leaving today, but he's never done laundry before, so I just want to make sure he can find his underwear." I shared that story for the first time yesterday. I was like, I should paint a picture of that a little bit more for anybody out there who's dealing with a lot of crap, can know what I'm talking about. So that was the context. And so my earliest formative years are a little bit of the hero child, whose job it is to try to save his family. I was selling flowers on street corners when I was 10 years old. No bullshit. I used to scrape gum under tables at McDonald's. And I used to sell handbags at flea markets for $10. So it's like this constant hustle. And back then, you did everything you could to hide the fact that you were poor. Ironically, now kids hide the fact that they're wealthy, which is always trippy to me. But anyway, I was like, you really now we got to be worried about that dad has a nice watch before I couldn't even afford a watch. But regardless, and I grew up on what you call government cheese, blocks of government cheese from the USDA that literally said courtesy of the United States government. So that was my framing, my context. And then was born with probably the most important gift of my life, which was a defiance that I didn't feel like just because I was deposited here as a zygote that I was going to end here in the ground, and that I had a bigger destiny in store for me. And so I was like constantly figuring out, like, how do I get out of this situation? And when you're a little kid, first you fantasize about the hero, usually a man. When you have a single mom, like, oh, there's a guy going to come in, going to rescue my family, and he never comes. And then you think society will come rescue you, like, my mother's clearly sick. Why are we constantly in an ER? Like, can't somebody do something? And then that doesn't happen. And then your teachers, and they don't even really know what you're going through. Then they don't come. And then you eventually conclude the cavalry's not coming. And this is where I think people's life goes in a sliding doors moment. When you conclude the cavalry's not going to come, are you going to be bitter about that and resign and assume that the die is cast? Or are you going to take matters into your own hands? And I had a very important break when I was young, and I decided from now on, I'm not going to embrace the victim narrative. My mother was very heavy and depressed, and naturally, right? Life beats you down. I would have these conversations with her. So, you know what? From now on, things don't happen to me. I happen to things. And that was my break from the victim narrative. And I decided I got to do everything humanly possible to accelerate my path to college, because I would read these ads in a local free newspaper called the Penny Saver, and it would say college students only, $7 an hour, $8 an hour. I was making $3.75 at McDonald's. And I was like, I got to become a college student. I could 2x my income. What the hell does it take to become a college student? And then I had an epiphany. I was like, my mother went and got a college education with a GED, but technically, if I were to drop out 2 years early, I could get to college, get that $8 an hour job now. And I was so excited. Here I am in Springfield Boulevard, Bayside, show up at high school and tell my guidance counselor, Mr. Barkin, like, hey, I got a plan. Cause like, why you got picked up again by the truant police? I was like, don't worry about that. And I was like, I haven't figured out. I'm going to drop out of high school and I'm going to get that job. I'm going to make $8 an hour. And he was a sweetheart, by the way. And he's like, oh, son, like, you're never going to be able to outrun the shame of being a high school dropout. Like, it sounds good as a little kid. It's a bad plan. Everybody, as you might imagine, thought that was crazy, And for me, I was like, but I don't understand. My mother's dying in the new room next door. We're living on government cheese. Nobody gives a shit. And I know how the story ends, but there's a way out of here faster than the conventional wisdom. And that's when my first burn the boats move. And we should, start here. That's why I always start here when I talk. Yeah. So the burn the boats is about self-sabotage of retreat. It's about eliminating the metaphorical boats that summon you to retreat, whatever that is in your mind. In my mind, it was conventional wisdom was telling me that this one move was going to brand me a loser forever, right? And yet, instinctively, I knew how the story ends. I knew my mother dies in that room next door. I knew that I fucking hated the world. And I don't know how that's going to end. You become self-destructive and angry as a kid. I knew what would go this path. I glimpsed a better future for myself, but all the conventional wisdom was arrayed against me. And that was my burn the boats move. I realized I need to sabotage retreat from this plan to drop out of high school. And the only way to do that is to fail every single class. And so I deliberately failed. I lived in a land of misfit toys with the kids with the beepers in the back of the room, selling drugs, doing all this stuff. Like I needed to be a write-off. So the system would leave me alone, stop picking me up at McDonald's, and just be like, this kid's a mess. And what happened is the system begins to align behind their statistics. We got to get him out of Cardozo High School. He's messing up our statistics. He's another dropout. And the system started writing me off. And that was my burn the boats move. Now, the day I drop out of high school, I talk about this in the book, everybody. And it's true story. I'm ruining the book a bit, but whatever. I go back to my science teacher and I walk in with my book, and there was the academic wall of shame. I don't know why I did this. I could have just, never given the books back, but I went to give my textbooks back, and I go to him. I book to Mr. Rosenthal, stares at the room without missing a beat. He's like, Higgins, what a waste. I'll see you at McDonald's. And the last thing I say in Cardozo High School, before I walk out, I'm so embarrassed and ashamed. And I tell him, you know what? If you see me at McDonald's, it's because I own it. True story. But I was a little punked too. You know what I mean? Like, he was right? Like, what are you doing? So this is my way of, we're trying to redeem some self-respect. But the true story is, back to changing your password on your bank account. I sat on the steps, heart racing. You know how you can hear the blood in your ear? And I was like, the blood is like, nobody's out there. It's one thing to cut school and hang out with your kids and smoke butts, packing Marlboros. It's another thing to be allowed to do it. That was one of the first things I was like, I have the freedom. I saw it. And no one's here, and no security guards making me go in because I have a little letter that says I'm a recent high school dropout. I can smoke all the cigarettes I want on the steps at Cardozo. I don't want to smoke cigarettes on the steps. I want to go back in, but it's too late. I burned the boats. And I remember picking myself up from those steps, be like, oh man, this is a messed up life, whatever. A week later, I was like, all right, I'm doing it. I took my GED on standby at Springfield Gardens High School. I took my SAT. I was able to do it on standby. I go ahead, I apply to Queens College. I get admitted to Queens College. Fast forward a year later, I go back to my prom, finishing my first year of high school. And that look of pity and a bit of contempt had transformed to begrudging admiration. The same people that had judged me on the way out, rightfully so, were now like, I was one of them, And so my whole book is about that moment, because that single moment of having the courage to burn the boats to go against conventional wisdom is the reason I was on Shark Tank. It's the reason why I ran 2 NFL teams. It's the reason I now teach at Harvard Business School. I have been constantly replicating this decision pattern where I put myself in a position that instinctively I think I'm capable of, but maybe I quite don't have all the answers figured out, and my credentials don't match up what I believe I'm capable of. And I sabotage retreat so that I can go 110% in. We can go into it in this conversation as to what are the layers of that. But what I found in working on my book is, throughout history, this simple formula is the one formula that every society turns to when their back is against the wall. And it's what science and psychology counterintuitively tells you is what you need to do to achieve 110%. So my book is a little bit the anti-atomic habits. My book is about what does it take to achieve things for which there is no template. Why don't I pause there?
That's awesome. Why don't we take that concept and actually apply it to business? Because most people in here are in business, or they're thinking about business, or they've been in business for a while. Like, tell us about your burn the boats moment when it came to business, and where does that line up in your story?
Yeah, I think where it really lines up, and I talk about this too, about anxiety and doubt. The one thing I have seen that has been absolutely true in business is that the people that are ultimately successful are the ones who first begin with an undying commitment to the goal, not the tactic. Mm-hmm. Where people make mistakes is they think that the way to be successful in business is to just persist. Trying harder it does not mean try same. It means try different, right? And so where it shows up in business as absolute commitment to the overall goal. What are we really trying to do here with this business, right? And where people make mistakes is most people start a business because they want freedom, financial freedom. They don't want a boss to tell them what to do. They want to leave something better for their kids. Where people make a mistake is they burn the boats for tactics. They think that this particular expression of a business, this particular type of cleaning business, that this is the thing you're doing, without realizing, wait, my goal is just to be able to take care of my family. And so what I find is the most successful entrepreneurs are those who burn the boats for goals, and they have very clear intentions as to what they're trying to achieve, number one. And then two, when things inevitably go to hell, which they're doing for me every single day in one of my businesses, right? I realized, wait, I already committed. I committed to the idea that I'm going to be fundamentally successful at the overall thing I'm trying to do, but I'm rigid in my vision and flexible in my execution. And the second part is where most people go wrong in business. They're rigid in their vision, but they're rigid in their execution. Jeff Bezos talks about this all the time. And therefore, what ends up happening is people get stubborn about trying to do the same thing over and over again, thinking that I'm just going to outwork it. And the reality is, when the market is speaking to you and telling you that you don't have product market fit, there aren't enough customers, your pricing is wrong, whatever it is, your sales guy sucks. When you're blindly persistent, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. When you are committed to the goal, but you are flexible in your execution, you will make the inevitable pivots you need to make along the way. I have not a single business in this place. I have tons of businesses, right? 5 years later, they barely resemble the first PowerPoint. But the ones that survived are the ones who made those course corrections all along the way. So what am I looking for when I'm backing a founder? I'm looking for a propensity to identify the moments when they need to course correct, and to have the humility and the constant confidence to implement it. Humility and confidence, you think those are kind of opposite, but they're actually completely synergistic, right? You need the humility to acknowledge that you might be wrong. You need the confidence to try to identify where you might be wrong. And you need to have the courage and confidence to tell the world, hey, I got it wrong. I'm changing direction. And at any moment in any day, I can give you like 3 examples. I won't, because now I'm outing CEOs are falling short. I'm constantly dealing with this fact pattern where everyone else knows that we're doomed. And we all kind of have a sense of what we need to do, but it's really hard. Some of it might involve cannibalization of our own idea. And you have a person at the top who's like refusing to make that course correction. And so I want to be very clear. You burn the boats for goals, not tactics.
Yeah. So let's keep macro instead of going micro on goals. And when you have a entrepreneur, actually not you entrepreneur, let's actually speak through you, Matt. Like, will you talk about your different seasons of goals from the moment where you're just like, I just want to be able to make $8 an hour, to getting to a place where you have created financial freedom, you created the freedom that you want in your life, and like kind of walk people through those journeys, and understanding that people are exactly where you said they were, is that they started their own business because they want freedom, right? And like walk through the journey of like being clear on that, and also knowing that once they achieve those things, like there's another layer that they can't even see right now behind that.
All right, I'm going to go free associating, weapons free, as they say. I'm just going to just download really quick before I forget different thoughts. But like, I think number one, it's for me, I have come to realize that the joy of living is in the striving. And that like, I've been to the top of the mountaintop, there isn't a lot to see. It's like, I enjoyed the process of climbing up. Mm-hmm. So something to realize for everybody here, ultimately you will become addicted to the act of creation and leveling up. And that's okay, as long as you're not running from something and not realizing that the boogeyman has been exterminated, right? Like for me, I still struggle with a fight or flight amygdala flashing, like mom's going to get evicted, response. I still struggle with that. So why that matters is, as you're striving for independence and freedom, you need to define what it looks like so that you can put an end to the act of running from something. We're all running from something. Ideally, we're running towards something, but the truth is most are running from something. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to live this way again. For me, it was inability to save my mother, right? It was vulnerability that we're going to end up in housing court, and I don't want that to happen to my kids. And so the first stage is to really define what some version of victory looks like. Not ultimate, because there is none, right? But some version of victory. And so for me, and I'll tell you my definition, we use the word fuck you money, right? I think that fuck you money is an illusion, because the truth is we're not dreaming of drinking pina coladas in the Cayman Islands. Like that's not anybody's real aspiration, but we're told that that's what fuck you money is. You know what fuck you money is? It's 3 years of liquidity. And here's why I've meditated on this a lot. It's because 3 years of cash flow is enough to say fuck you to anything you don't like about your life and reinvent yourself. It's enough to start a business and stabilize it. It takes about 3 years, right? It's enough to get a master's degree and change your education. The average person can learn a language fluently in 12 months if they focus on it. 3 years is enough to do 10,000 hours of habits. And so for me, I got obsessed with like, well, I don't want the goal to be fuck you money, because it's like so far away, and then it's going to make me rationalize making all these compromises with my kids. And you know what I mean? So the goal became 3 years of liquidity. And anyone in this room could achieve that, provided you don't move the goalpost on you and say, well, 3 years involves me having a Bugatti and a nice Rolex and all that. So number one goal for me was, let me set my intention and try to really stick to it. And it became 3 years. Number two was, let me do it my way. If I were to die and my epitaph said, herein lies a dad who compromised everything to invent great products, but he never saw his kids, that would be so crushing to me. And I realized I need to construct a life that gets me where I want to get to while ensuring I'm very intentional about the boundaries that matter to me. So the boundary that mattered most to me was like, I needed to take care of those little babies. And I needed to, my epitaph to say, herein lies a dad who gave it the best he could, like left it on his field. So second point to everybody on this call, you don't need to compromise everything. You can draw boundaries on what matters most, but you will need to compromise something. Choose the things you're going to compromise that you don't care that much about. So for me, I constructed a world where I worked all the time, but I made sure I put the children first the best I can. I don't have many friends and I don't go out at all, but I married my best friend. My best friend, I made her my partner in every single business and in every single context so I could hang out with her. So I now have a very self-sufficient universe, right? I set my intentions, I drew boundaries, whereas you're going to hear messages on Instagram, especially Kevin O'Leary, who I love, does is like, you're going to have to compromise everything and you're going to have to, I'm like, I don't think that's true. I think there's a third way. You could take it out of yourself, right? I'll probably leave this earth 10 years earlier because I fucking killed myself. Like, I'm okay with that because the kids remember that I was there and then I got my fuck you money in 3 years, you know? And then here's the important part. Once you achieve the baseline level of your success and you define it, now you're going to want more and you want to keep striving. And that's okay. But something sets in, which is risk aversion. Mm-hmm. The challenge is the more things you have, the more things you're afraid to lose. And I noticed this started happening to me when I had stature and reputation. Like, think about it. I'm on the faculty of Harvard Business School. Like, that is a crazy credential for a kid who had a GED, right? And so that becomes now something I'm afraid to lose. Yeah. I now have a lot of money. I have the FU money in the bank account. I'm afraid to lose that. I have my companies. I'm afraid to lose those. Those become prisons of our own making. And so what you have to do when you achieve a certain level of success to ensure that you're not becoming risk adverse, you have to meditate and define your needs as narrowly as possible. Yeah, as you get bigger, define your needs as small as possible and never let go, because we all move the goalpost on myself. So this is true. I constantly am doing that to myself. I'm like, okay, if I was to get annihilated tomorrow and canceled, whatever, what do I really need? I'm like, all right, I need the respect of my children. I need their 529 funded because God forbid I leave this earth and I can't pay for their education. It would kill me. I need my best friend, my wife, and I need a roof over my head. Otherwise, you could deposit me in any third world country and I'll take my lemonade stand and I'll start a CPG lemonade business. Like, I'll figure it out again. So that was a lot to download, as I know everyone's on this journey. So if I was to distill it, summarize it, it'd be like, make sure you define what a degree of winning looks like, because otherwise you'll just be scrambling, and you're never going to cut yourself any slack and you're going to be an anxious mess forever. And then once you achieve that, it's okay that you're going to want more, but just make sure you define your needs as narrowly as possible so that you're not afraid to take risk.
That was awesome. I think
somebody just asked me, by the way, Mr. Higgins, Amaryllis, do you believe we fear losing everything as we get older? I believe we do get more afraid as we get older. And I actually think the thing that makes us afraid should be the thing that powers us. Like, when you look at kids, I see this happen all the time. It's kind of sad. I see people with an unmet ambition and they subconsciously blame their kids and are like, God, I really wanted to do this, but like, you know, for my children, I decided to have a mediocre life and compromise all my dreams. Now I blame them for it. And they never even asked me to do it. And when in reality, I look at my kids as like, I would die. I would bleed out. Right. I would like give up my organs to make my kids successful. I use that to power me to take risk. Right. Like, it makes me much clearer when somebody tries to compromise my time and get in the way of what I'm trying to achieve for my children. That's what enables me to fight. So I think people do become more risk adverse, but I think it's because they're using that to rationalize why they're not going all in on their ambition. I think a lot of times it's just bullshit.
Wow.
Keep going.
I want to let that sit for a minute, because so, and just so you know, I don't know if you were paying attention to the chat while you were going, but your last two segments were absolutely insane. I think you actually just gave a lot of people a lot of paradigm shifts. But one thing that I do want to hit on is that, you know, when you're young, this resonated with me a lot. Just, you know, you and I effectively, weirdly, have the exact same upbringing. I have a single mom who raised 4 boys, and we were all absolute freaking delinquents, me being the biggest one. But it's something that you said is so interesting. When you're younger, right, you're not afraid to effectively burn the boats as much as you are when you're older. And I don't think, you know, and I was going to ask you this question. I was going to ask, does it become easier to burn the boats later? And I would argue that it probably isn't, because the things that you're giving up probably mean more to you. As you become wiser, as you become older, you have a family, you have loved ones, you have things that are on the line. When you're 20, there's not much really that's on the line. You still got 80 years of life left, or 60, 70 years of life left. You've still got relationships that can be made. But when you've got a wife and beautiful children, you've got a lot to lose. So burning the boats can have a lot of ramifications. So to Amaryllis's question, I'd imagine yes. The answer is yes. And I'm speaking as a relatively young person, but I would say that's not necessarily the worst thing ever. It just means that you do become more afraid because there's more on the line. It also, to me, means that you've accomplished greater things from when you were younger.
Agree with that. So let's break that down a bit. And somebody asked me to re-say a quote from I'll say it really quick. You need to work on defining your needs as narrowly as possible. Always need to meditate on that. But back to the point about when you get older, here's the challenge. I think that is generally true. It could be a byproduct of the fact that you have achieved great things. And so therefore, and by the way, if you're content and satisfied, game over. We don't even need to have the chat anymore, right? Like you don't need to burn the boats. I would argue that the joy of living is in the striving. I do believe that. And studies show there's a reason why people who get gold medals in the Olympics suffer from depression a week later, because they're like, oh shit, it turned out I like the training, so whatever. But let's presume that you're perfectly well adjusted and you don't need to achieve anything more as you get older. For the rest of us who probably will, well, here's the problem. And I see this happening now. It's so crazy. Compounding is the most glorious invention ever created. No one created it. It's just a rule of the universe. But I had the joy of spending time with Warren Buffett for a day. It was incredible. And we were talking about compounding. My journey, why I have this Forrest Gump-like resume, is because by dropping out of high school when I was 16, I pulled forward my entire life by 2 years on a percentage basis. Like that's pretty crazy, right? At that age. And I got the benefit of compounding throughout the course of my life. The challenge is when you're 50 and I'm 48 now, right? Like your amount of time you have for your decisions to compound is now compressed. You don't have the benefit of time anymore compounding. No. You just don't, professionally and otherwise. So why burn the boats is so important when you're younger is because you have more time for you to reap the exponential returns of your risk taking. And then later, unfortunately, two bad things happen to you as you get older. Is one, you have a lower propensity to take risk because of what we just talked about. But two, your risks have to be more impactful because you have less time for the benefits to compound. And so it makes you have to be so damn intentional. Now let's talk about patterns. This is where patterns come in. So how do you make better decisions as you get older? You have to make sure that you've benefited from your pattern recognition and from making course corrections. And I find now as my cohort all gets older, all my people around me, I find everyone now dealing with the fact that bad patterns compound too. As much as good things compound, bad things obviously are compounding. And a lot of when I look at people unhappy with their life and their decisions is because they never interrupted the patterns that were governing them, and the patterns compounded. And now the weight of the patterns is so heavy that it's hard to make those course corrections. So that's just a long dissertation, and I want to download what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there about the idea of like when life is shitty, it's easy to like say, I'm going to get rid of my shitty life to go to a good life. And when life gets good, it's more difficult to say, I'm going to burn the boats on a good life to have a great life. And then I think the level that I want to hear from your point of view is like, when you have a great life, how do you say, okay, I'm going to burn the boats to have an extraordinary life?
Okay, that's great. So let's talk about that. There's a concept in loan and zoning, which I love. Anyone out there is a real estate, or has real estate experience will understand this, right? If I look at a warehouse in Chelsea 100 years ago, and I went and visited that or Tribeca, New York City, that warehouse was a slaughterhouse, right? And now it's where Taylor Swift, has her date, right? Like that warehouse has changed along with its context. And so there's a concept in zoning to ensure that land is always put into its highest and best use, called highest and best use. You look at that piece of land and you say, what's the highest and best use of that land in 2023? I have been applying that logic to myself for 20 something years. Every week I ask myself, what's the highest and best use of Matt Higgins now? And when I look at people who got stuck along the way, who are my contemporaries, and I'm like, hey, you're in that same job we were in like 10 years ago. I would have thought that you would have been like a master of the universe. This is not judgmental. I'm intellectually curious. Now, if they say, God, I'm so happy I decided to park here. This is what I was meant to be. Usually there's a melancholy, a longing of a life that could have been. And I'm trying to figure out like what happened. And you know what happened? They didn't ask themselves, what was the highest and best use of them now? And so here's why let's make that more tangible, right? Yeah. when I went on Shark Tank, which I mean, Shark Tank, right? A high school dropout instead of Shark Tank, Mark Cuban, like the craziest thing, I got such depression the second time I went on. I remember saying to my wife, I was like, she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I can't imagine doing something more uncomfortable that is a bigger reach. And I'm a little sad for the absence of ambition that would be as hard and as stimulating as that. And I hate to think that this is the end of the road. And I like, I don't know what's next. I can't conceive of a harder thing to do. And I remember I have a restaurant on the periphery of Harvard Business School, and I was visiting it. And I remember walking through the campus. I was having this conversation with my wife at that time. And then I was like, huh, Harvard Business School. I was like, I always wanted to go to the best, and I never got a chance to compete because I was taking care of my mom selling flowers. But that sounds like a rationalization. I don't know if I really could have gotten into that institution because I'm not disciplined enough as my son even. So I don't know if that's just talk, but I was like, what would be better than even going to Harvard Business School, teaching at Harvard Business School? I'm going to teach at Harvard Business School. I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on that for the next year of my life. And I did that. Now, here's how it breaks down. The highest and best use of Matt Higgins at that moment in time was to fulfill this lifelong dream of teaching and competing at the highest level of academia. Now, the Matt Higgins before Shark Tank, let's be honest, Harvard's not taking my phone call.
Yeah.
They may have, but there's no way that I'm getting an audience. But when you go on Shark Tank, a couple of things happen. People presume you're really good at investing, and there's a certain heat around you. And so I would say to everyone on this call, especially business owners, that is the thing that prevents businesses from scaling, is they don't say, okay, what is the highest and best use of my business now? I've achieved this level. I'm doing $1 million in revenue. What's my unlock to go to the next level? Like, what am I missing? And then usually it's a key hire that you're afraid to commit to because, you're just like, oh, but then I got to commit to 70 grand and, and I don't really have the demand yet. I think I'd have the demand and then it would free up my time. But now I'm nervous because what if that's a bad hire? And, I'm doing it all myself. And then your identity is about bootstrapping because you're like, I've always done it myself. And so that's when most people stumble. They fail to transcend. And so the way I do it, highest and best use. And then I'm honest with myself to say, what am I lacking to be able to go to the next level? And back to all the small business owners here, I find the hardest transition that businesses have to make is not 0 to 1. It's 1 to 10. It's being able to let go of the reins just a little bit and realize that you'll be infinitely more successful if you could hire people better than you at doing what you do. And I find most business owners still think like employees. They don't take like almost a mercenary view of themselves as a product and be like, that winning is rendering myself obsolete. Winning is hiring somebody better at this job than I ever could be. And I find the majority of entrepreneurs and founders struggle with that because their identity becomes around them doing the work as opposed to getting somebody else to do the work for them.
Wow. The audience felt that.
I love that we're having this conversation. This is what I needed today, by the way.
Yeah.
I was exhausted. I'm sick today. I'm under the weather. I don't feel like doing anything. This is much more cathartic and fun. I just get to philosophize.
This is amazing. I mean, one, I'm glad it is. I'm absolutely glad it is for you. But I want to highlight what you just said and like the thesis of that. It reminds me of something that was said about a very popular YouTube influencer, and it's about their route and why they're dominating the YouTube game. And this line always stuck with me ever since I heard it. And it's basically what you just echoed: care more about winning than about being right. And when you care more about winning, you will realize that you're probably not the best at all the things that you think you're the best at. And it's actually one of the things that I'm actually having to learn in the season that I'm in and accept and embrace in the season that I'm in my business, is that I have to surrender control in order to grow. I have limited bandwidth. I've got limited attention in order for me to grow. And for so many people in the chat right now, for so many people who are watching, because a lot of our folks are a little bit on the newer side of entrepreneurship. They're, ever, right? Not even maybe a CEO, CO, or like a C-suite hire, but maybe even a lower level hire. And that's tough to do. And I understand that because we're so, I think, in our system in somewhat of a broken way, we're always kind of taught that that old adage, what is it? If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
I know. I always find that a little bit like, if you want something to stay small, do it yourself. Should be the amendment to that one, right? Like, but let's talk about how a lot of people on this call probably got here today, right? Like, you did it in spite of, it was so hard, and no one gave you that money, and like, everyone thought you were not going to pull it off. Like there was a lot of like rebellion on this phone call, if I had to guess, a lot of defiance. And so, you were born of defiance and then you live defiantly. But the problem is that actually doesn't scale. What scales is redefining what success looks like as in a very mercenary, objective way, as if you're a product. And so it's like you do have to pivot from being defiant and belligerent to being somebody who is an expert at deploying others, enlisting others to the opportunity so that they can do the work so you can scale. Trust me, like I give that back to commiserating. Like I'm going to asterisk the shit out of my book. Like just because I've seen stuff doesn't mean I could always implement it, right? It took a long time for me to be comfortable, like, oh, wait, me being a lone wolf isn't getting anywhere. Like my whole 20s and 30s, right? I was the youngest press secretary in New York. I oversaw the redevelopment of the Trade Center. Like these are heavy things. I deal with the commissioner of the NYPD and try to get him to respect me when I'm like 12 years old. Like I've been in these tough spots. And so my whole definition was lone wolf because I had been abandoned and neglected as a kid. Let's be honest, right? Like, but then I realized like actually divorce brought me to my knees. You usually need something to cripple your identity so you could rebuild it again. And I was leveled and I had cancer and I had gotten divorced. And I was like, wait, there's probably a better way. And you know who got me there? Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know anybody here who knows Gary Vaynerchuk, right? But like, I remembered it was my first experience of becoming fantastically successful by identifying somebody who was materially better than me in so many ways. And I met Gary in a bagel store in 2009. In 2009, I gave him 8 Jets tickets to start his new agency with his little brother, AJ, and it's going to be huge. And I was like, this dude's totally crazy, but I think he sees the future and I'm going to back him. And I backed him. Fast forward, we're going to do $320 million in revenue this year. It's the largest social media agency in the world. And let me tell you the ways Gary Vaynerchuk is better than me. Gary sleeps 8 hours a night like a baby. I'm lucky if I get 2. Gary doesn't care what other people think. I am constantly auditing where I got it wrong, not because I fear judgment, because I'm trying to get it right. I'm so hard on myself. Gary is undisturbed. Like at the end of the day, Gary goes to garage shops and is very happy. He has a very simple life. And if it was all taken away from him, he would still sell shit at, garage sales on the weekend. I'm like, he has a very strong friend group of 15 people that he loves and he plays basketball with. Like Gary is a better constructed person than I am. And I mean that lovingly toward myself. And you know what's great about it? That means that I have not hit the ceiling of Matt Higgins. Surrounding yourself with better people who work for you and help scale your business also opens your eyes that there's more left for you to do on this earth. And like the worst thing would be feeling like you were a finished work of art, right? You'd be like, well, that's sort of depressing. And so one of the benefit of hiring better people, when you hire somebody better than you, you're like, oh shit, what else am I bad at? This is so exciting. And by the way, all I had to do is pay that person, give them a little bit of equity and I get the benefit. Like now I'm like a multi-headed Hydra. Like, so if you learn to get excited by discovering what you suck at, you realize how much more potential you have because you can hire other people to gap fill you. And except don't do that in your marriage. Because I think this is how I do that. People complete you is also dangerous, but we can get into that.
Awesome. I want to take a question from the chat. And I actually want to bring on one of the leaders in our community who's Adi. She's actually somebody who has got your book because I've given to her many months ago. She's read it. And so her question is on your book. So Adi, I'm going to unmute you here and spotlight you here. And if you will, please.
By the way, Adi is one, another feedback for you, Adi. Like I see you smiling and nodding. Like the energy you put out in the world brings back that kind of energy. I'm paying attention to everybody here, and I was watching that you were. So thank you, because it actually helps the speaker know that you're connecting.
Yes, thank you so much. And I appreciate you both, everyone here. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. It's so exciting to listen to your experiences and just reading your book. I was just nodding the whole time. I'm like, oh my God, I felt this before. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Adi, if you want to, go ahead and ask your question that you put in the chat here about overcoming poverty in the change of direction. And I can just I can ask it if you don't have it in front of you, but I can.
Yes, please. It's way up there somewhere.
Okay, cool. So Adi says, talk about overcoming poverty to change the direction of your adult future. You seeked opportunities and moved at full force. What mindset, thoughts, or processes made you put your ego aside, be really uncomfortable, and force yourself to tables that you weren't necessarily invited to?
Great question. I think for me, it was realizing I had a great moment on Shark Tank. You remember this from the book, so I'm kind of ruining it. But when I went on Shark Tank, as absurd as this sounds to everybody who loves that show, and it's like, well, it's like Mom and American Pie. It's like an amazing show. Why would you be nervous? For me, it really felt like, as a person who had spent so much time behind the scenes architecting things that were not always visible, right? I was a press secretary. I had always been behind the scenes. Now I was really stepping out. It felt like I had to confront every feeling of fraud that I had ever dealt with before. And it all collided in a terrible 48 hours. Back to Gary Vee sleeping like a baby. That is not me. And so the night before I go on Shark Tank, my sweet wife, Sarah, who's my best friend, partner, and everything, she's like, she gets up like at 5 a.m. like, all right, baby, are you ready to do it? I'm like, ready to do it. I haven't slept. I was like, this is so stupid. Like, why am I doing this? I had mapped this out all night long while she was sleeping, and I'm powering through 2 Ambiens. Like, Jesus, I have to sleep. I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell them that I ordered salmon at the hotel. Literally mapped it. I made sure by the way, made sure that the in-room dining had salmon in case they were going to call me out. Like, this is the definition of madness. And I'm going to call Rohan Oza and I looked up where he looked. It's only 1.8 miles away. I was like, and he's going to take my slot, right? And I tell my wife this, and I'm like, babe, I have such crushing imposter syndrome. Like, I'm going to call it in. She's, why don't you take a shower and sort of think it through? And so I actually went into the shower, and I was like, wow, I cannot believe that I'm willing to capitulate on the altar of this, on the precipice of doing something so amazing. And I remember channeling Eminem, believe it or not. I was like, who's gonna I was like, I'm gonna get the poet from Detroit. I was like, I'm gonna put Eminem on a loop on my headphones, and I'm gonna listen to Lose Yourself for 3 hours. She's like, okay, baby, like, that's a good plan. There's a video of me in the car. Mom, spaghetti, never saw it already. Like, it's a long way of getting to I'm setting the scene. So I'm on the show, and I'm like, who can I be vulnerable with? Anybody here know Damon John? Put a little, respond if you know him, because I love him. Damon John is from Queens. He worked at Red Lobster. He's a similar journey. He's Black. I'm not, but like, we have a lot of things in common, right? And became very close. I pull him into the dressing room, and I'm telling the story. First of all, he's like, Matt, you know what? F those, whatever. Like, they didn't sell flowers in Queens. And like, but he told me the most important thing I'll tell everybody here when you deal with imposter syndrome. He told me, Matt, you belong here, because you are here. And so I would say to anyone out there, whoever deals with that thing, remember, there's no final arbiter of belonging in this universe. Back to your question. There's nobody who invites you into the table. There's no one who deals with, whatever. The reality is, like, if you're there, you belong there. And that is the simple truth. People aren't going to allow you in. They're not going to tell you that it's your time. They're not going to tell you belong here. And so that's number one. Number two, then how do you get in the room, though? Like, what's the formula? And so for me, the formula has always been, I hate this word quiet quitting, by the way. I think it's such bullshit. It's just a reflection of our unemployment being 3.8%. Like, quiet quitting is your neighbor's future promotion, right? But for me, my formula was make myself indispensable at whatever it is I'm doing, and I'll always be giving another opportunity. When you make yourself indispensable, either as a business owner or as an employee, right? The cycle of progression is, it creates leverage. People use the leverage the wrong way, though. They use the leverage to try to get more money. They use the leverage to try to get, increase your pricing right away, or for an employee to try to get a raise, right? No, leverage should be used for increased opportunity to supply a service to that person, to get more responsibility. And then ultimately, when you have made yourself indispensable, then you transact. And so for me, my formula about ego has been, I will do whatever terrible thing somebody else doesn't want to do, and I will do it better, harder, and I will make myself indispensable. To this day, even with the book, which I care so much about getting the word out, right? I'm always looking for, what's the weird, humiliating, undignified thing that somebody else who is an author at my level wouldn't do? I'm going to go do that. And so the first time I did it, believe it or not, was I got offered to do a radio interview, and the radio interview was from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. live, talking about UFOs and things like that. And I remember getting the thing, and I was like, okay, that's the thing. No one, this is not rational. I will do that thing. And I remember my wife, I got it all set up. I ordered a quarter pounder with cheese and large fries. I went full Queens mode, and I stayed up. I did an all-nighter to do this, right? I finally go to bed at 5 a.m. This is a true story. 5 a.m. I wake up in the morning at 8. The book is in the top 500 on Amazon. I'd gone to bed, it was 20,000, because I did the one thing that nobody would do. And I didn't care about dignity, ego. I didn't give a shit. I would talk about UFOs or conspiracy theories, whatever it take. That was the thing. So in my experience about ego, when you do the thing that other people won't do and make yourself indispensable, weirdly, the universe conspires in your favor. And so that's how I relate to ego. Like, I'm happy when I see an opportunity to humiliate myself. I feel like, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Matt, Adi, thank you
I want
for
to say
that
a quick
question.
shout out to Renee. Renee shared on the group chat about your stepdaughter dying and how it brought you to your knees. I just want to acknowledge that, and I'm sorry because that sounds, horrendous. So I just wanted to say that I see you.
Awesome, guys. We have one more question. We're going to bring on Marlon. So Marlon is another big leader inside Sam's community as well. And Marlon, I muted you here. Are you on here, boss?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome, my friend. Well, if you don't mind, go ahead and share away or ask away.
Yeah, well, first off, let me say thank you, Logan. Thank you, Sam, for bringing Matt here. Matt, you're freaking mind-blowing. Like, I've been taking notes nonstop.
Thank you.
Like, in my notebook, got it like opened here. So if I was ever
Thank
looking
you.
down, you were just dropping gems. And I really love what you shared just now about doing the thing that's uncommon, making yourself so indispensable. And you mentioned earlier that, encounter with Gary Vee, right? You got to bring someone into your world who showed you that you were capable of so much more and really helped level up the ceiling. And so I've been taught that proximity is power, that my life has changed. All the cool things in my life have come as a result of knowing amazing men and women like Logan, like Sam. It's very much a product of good relationships. I want to know, how intentional are you with relationships and what that looks like as far as you vetting the circle of influence that you bring to you? Like you mentioned, Gary has 15 people that he absolutely loves, and that seems to be his inner circle. How much do you vet and build your circle? How often does that change? And what sort of relationships are you looking for today at this stage in your life?
Wow, such good questions. Somebody
Dude,
said,
amazing
"You're
questions.
asking question, they're going to be great questions." They weren't lying. So anyway, thank you. So great question. So I think actually the answer to that question depends on the phase you're in. So let me talk to everybody here who's really an operator now and is building their business. I find where a lot of people go wrong is they settle for the illusion of progress. They think it's been a good day because I had a random courtesy meeting with so-and-so and so-and-so, and they populate their schedule and they let other people set their intentions. And so I think when you're an operator and you're building, you have to be laser intentional with how you use your time and who you spend your time with. You have to really curate. And when I find people who don't scale, or I see a lot of like spinning wheels, it's because they're not being intentional, because they're like, oh, I met with so-and-so, it was a great meeting. I was like, but wait, they're never going to hire you because they have a vendor who's like their brother-in-law. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to switch vendors. Like, what are you doing? And so for me, I have been incredibly intentional to the point of actually creating a lot of friction, because I would be highly intentional because I was an operator building these businesses. And like, I don't want to play defense. I want to play offense. I don't want to respond to every email and do that. So that's my own view. However, when you get to a certain point, you need to make an important pivot, and you need to allow room for serendipity or save space for grace. You need to sort of not be so mercenary about your time and how you use it, because something magical happen. That is the phase that I'm in now. I'm trying to consciously be intentional about serendipity and creating opportunities for it. So I would throw it back to you. If you've hit your base level, like, okay, the business is working, I'm kind of where I need, I know that serendipity is going to have a yield, then I don't have to be so intentional. But so for me, it comes in phases. Just so fascinating you're asking this question right now, because like I went to UAE 6 weeks ago, right before the conflict erupted, right? I'm so glad I did. And I didn't have a very like a crazy agenda. And I had only a couple of deals that I was working on that were marginally worth my time. But I was like, no, I need to allow for serendipity. So many crazy good things have happened as a result of me doing that it's amazing. But 5 years ago, that would have been a mistake. The compromises of doing a random trip for 4 days would not have been worth it. So great question.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Yeah. And I think one more point that I find, the one part where I disagree with Gary about, and a lot of like the hustle culture out there, like Gary's book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, right? That's all about like make deposits, man. And then one day ask for it. I agree with that generally, but people now are being very transactional about that logic. You're pretending to care. Your deposits are fake. You're like, hey, how can I be in service to you? It's like, you don't really mean that. I actually think the better way to get people's attention and form relationships is to like lower the bar. Just ask a question. Hey, like if I get a DM from somebody, it's like, hey man, I own a cafe and I'm really struggling with whether I should take my roastery in house or I should just buy somebody else's beans. I'm like, oh, I could answer that question. When I get a message from somebody like, I would like you to be my mentor, I'm like, I haven't met you. Like what? Like we're gonna be, So anyway, so that's a way of saying like, I do think people as they build their network, they should just think common sense. Like, okay, my ultimate goal is for somebody to have a degree of intimacy with me. How do I begin to form intimacy? And one is by lowering myself to say, I have a simple question. I'm not be respectful of your time. And people go right for the close, like, be my mentor. It's like, what are you talking about?
I absolutely love it. And I gotta say again, Matt, thank you for just showing up so authentically, because it's like it's oozing out of you. Like, it resonates that you are who you are and that you lived your life very much on purpose, being yourself. And that gives permission to just about every one of us to do the same. So thank you for that.
I love that comment. Thank you. That's my goal. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Marlon.
Hey, somebody asked me really quick. I'm gonna do like I'm gonna speed date on a couple of quick questions if that's okay with you.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, we're coming
quick.
up to the last couple of minutes. So if you, I mean, only if you have time, otherwise we can wrap this up. So
No, one quick. Somebody asked me about meditation. I heard you
Okay.
meditate. Yeah, I would. I think meditation is the greatest gift you can give yourself. I mean, both neurochemically and otherwise. I fall short all the time. I'm like an aspiring Buddhist who never quite gets there, but I believe in meditating. And then these other ones are probably a little bit hard to answer in this format. So I'll let you do your wrap. What was the proximity in your life? Oh, that was what you just asked. Perfect.
So yeah, and let's finish up with you know, it was funny because your experience coming on Shark Tank was I had moments like that this morning coming on interviewing you. Just like, I don't even like, what if I just don't try? What if I don't show up? Can Sam just do this on his own? Like, I don't know if I want to be here. Right. So like the very similar thoughts.
Little old me, the little guy from Queens.
Yeah, just
I enter that response. Well, now you know there was no reason.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, what do I like? How do I prepare this and like give value to you? And I actually got on your Instagram, and you have a little link to burntheboats.com/Triton, which is like an AI tool. So how this wouldn't be a great interview if we didn't talk about AI, right? It's 2023. And so I got on there and I literally asked the question. I was like, I'm going to interview Matt Higgins today. What questions would give value to Matt and also to the audience? And so listen, give me a ton of questions. And there's one I want to end with because I think it'll be helpful.
That's amazing, by the way. I'm gonna 30 seconds, everyone. I'm obsessed with AI as a great equalizer, the greatest wealth creator, right? And I decided, I think I was the first publisher in probably the world who took their book and then took every single study in the book and decided to create an alter ego called Triton. Triton is Poseidon's son who has the power to calm the seas. So I'm extending my burn the boats metaphor. But 24 hours a day now, you can go to Triton. I pay for this, and you could interact with Triton as if it's me. But anyway, but what did Triton say to ask?
Yeah, so it gave me 15 questions, but I'm going to ask one because I think it's going to be a great. I'll find the most value from it. I think you'll find the most value from it, and ultimately, I think the audience as well. And so the question was, what qualities make you someone that you respect and admire? Like, what qualities do you respect and admire in other people?
Oh, such a great. I mean, number one is empathy. People who I think that we have a fundamental choice when we go through hard things. We could choose to deny others that which was denied to us, kindness, resources, equal opportunity, or we could choose to take the awareness of the impact of something that was denied you, not having a father, not having money, and choose to extend that to others because you know what an impact it would make on their life. And so for me, I've chose the latter. I know what it means to be powerless. I know what it means to be desperate. I know what it means to not have resources. I know what it means to not have a dad and, in your life in a meaningful way. And so, I choose that. So for me, when I see people who have been through hell and have saved space for empathy in spite of, I admire that the most. And then from a professional standpoint, what I think has the greatest unlock is people who over-index for self-awareness. When I find somebody who is so comfortable being exposed and so intellectually curious that they want to expose themselves because they understand that's where the greatest unlock, I know that I could do so much with that person because self-awareness scales. When you have employees, by the way, as everyone builds their company, or leaders, when you find a leader that over-indexes for self-awareness, think about it. When they're fucking up or they're not hitting their numbers, you won't need to, hey, Bob, you didn't hit your quota today. And all your numbers in your management presentation turned out them out to be true. Bob will be figuring it out himself. You know what I mean? And so those are my two: empathy and then self-awareness from a practical standpoint, because self-awareness scales and self-awareness usually results in people being emotionally regulated and it just works a lot better. So those are the two I would say.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much. Sam, will you give Matt a send off, please.
By the way, this is the last point. As you scale your businesses, you're going to have to do context switching. You have to be really good at context. So as we wrap up this, I'm getting the signal. Now I'm going back to Harvard Business School with 2 tenured professors who've been on the faculty, one since 1978, and I have to prep for a class. So it's like this amazing conversation. So everyone out there, become a Jedi at context switching, because that's how you scale. Be comfortable. All right, I'm going to jump.
Wow, Matt, go crush everything you got to do. Again, thank you so much for taking this time. It was sage wisdom. It was Jedi master wisdom from Matt Higgins today. Brother, thank you so much.